Today, I am really proud to welcome Ben Shoemaker, a former colleague of mine who, with me, collaborated in the creation of a new team. At what seems like many, many years ago. Not even seems like many, many years ago. It was, in fact, many years ago.
Was.
Uh, and a person who's been on the technical side, on the product side, and I guess in the most recent period of your career have been experiencing as a IC, as a primary technical contributor. You've caught in the bug of coding.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I always wrote some code, but it was not good. It was meant for my eyes only. And I think these new tools. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it. It's weird to say. I'm a technical co-founder for a startup right now, among other things I'm doing. Which is not something I could have said a year ago. I'm certain of that, and I think that says a lot about sort of how these tools are moving.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's really good to see you. And I think that when we worked together, we were both early in our careers and we were both in the process of, I guess maybe the end of the Web 2.0 period when a lot of the big data was the sort of name of the game, emergence of machine learning as a common discipline, every application was beginning to incorporate the features of search and machine learning and optimizing people's user experience in their applications with the data they collected over them. And it feels like now we're in a totally new era of technology.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, there's a lot of hyperbolic ways to talk about AI, but it's and it remains to be seen, whether it's going to be the singularity or just a transformative technology. I think the baseline already, if it stopped right now, it would already if you just integrate what we have now in the next 10 years, it would transform white collar work in I don't know, industrial revolution level changes. So yeah, I would say it's pretty significant time.
Yeah. And I think drawing the point there that if it stopped right now, and it's, at least from my perspective, it's clearly not stopping right now. It seems to
No,
be
it's
kind of
not.
ongoing. Yeah. Where are your predictions? What do you as a veteran of this industry, somebody who's worked across a bunch of different types of products, things that have been very, very data driven and technical, um, where do you dare to forecast?
I mean, one of the things I tell people is anyone who confidently tells you where anything is going right now is not is they're blowing smoke. So I don't confidently forecast anything. I mean, there are when I think about AI, I'm I love it as a tool. I'm fascinated by it, by using it. I see everything it unlocks. I'm existentially concerned about its impact on society. I'm existentially concerned about the security, to our species implications of it. So there's a whole open, I don't know, it's really hard to predict. I think I was saying though, if we sort of take some of the singularity level things off the table, which I don't think they are, but if we do for this conversation, I already go to AI for most questions. I already talk to AI over, asking a person for a lot of things, including myself, so so I think if you just extrapolate that, I think what's missing right now is all of the ecosystem around it, all of the harnesses and tools and checks and everything. And a lot of product work right now is just constraining AI and getting it to kind of do what you want and try to make it semi-deterministic. I think as that stuff happens, there are just a lot of white collar jobs that either are going to have to change dramatically, which is definitely true, or they'll just go away. And I think both of those are going to happen.
Just prior to this conversation, I read on LinkedIn somebody had posted that the entire code base of SimCity 2, which I believe is from the 1990s, it may even be from the 1980s, had just been ported from its original composition in a very, very early version of C, or a version of that era of C, into JavaScript. And that somebody had done this completely blind. It wasn't done by anything other than an agent reading this, instantiating here, reading this, instantiating here. Which of course is just something that would be totally unthinkable just a few years ago, that this could happen and this could be automated and this could be successful. reflecting on that and just sort of taking that, I guess, as a jumping off point, what what do you think is going to happen to like the conventional roles of engineer and product management? What have you observed already in your career since this revolution has begun?
Yeah, and I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts on that too. You have a different vantage point than I do, obviously. But like when you kind of like look at some of the big things happening right now, like one big thing is like the cost of implementation is plummeting for software. So like, what are the implications of that? Well, one of the implications of that is sitting around and waiting for a PM to like write you a spec is just not, it's not workable. So like I'll give an example. That startup I'm working on, I'm the technical contributor for it. And the co-founder is not a technical guy. He has like deep domain expertise in his vertical. And we spent the first month or so we worked together kind of like I was like, hey, I need these requirements. And he would kind of try to give them to me. And it wouldn't really be what I needed. It'd be like overly complex and have a lot of sprawl. And, he was using AI tools too. So they were dumping a bunch of text at me and it wasn't really working that well. And at a certain point, this wasn't like it was a deliberate choice to try this, but I didn't know what would happen. So I was just like, I'm just going to go build. I'm just going to try to like, I've learned enough. I understand what we're trying to do here. I'm just going to kind of like throw some stuff together and then he can decide whether he likes it or not. And I did that. And he was like, this is great. Like we never would have gotten here. And part of what I found interesting about that is that previously you would never do that because it was so costly to like write all that code, like building a feature just to like look at it and maybe it's good. As a PM, like a year ago, I would have been like, ooh, that like sounds terrible. Like that's wasting my team's time. Now it's like it took me like a day, to build all this stuff. I'd show it to him. He's like, yeah, like 80% of that. And we're moving way faster operating with that. So I think one version of it is people are doing both. You have to understand the product and then go implement it. And that way, like, you're not bound by somebody who like dictates your priorities. You can prioritize yourself and you can go. And that's always been kind of like, if you have an engineer who thinks that way, they're like, is your PM? You're like, I love this person. Like, I want no one to like talk to them and let them just build amazing things. I think everyone could be that way now. I think like that's the like prototype going forward. The other thing I'll say is I have had some other conversations with product folks about this. I think there is room for like a much more expansive product role that is just able to do way more. Like you can do like tons of competitive analysis and like build a super clean vision and like evaluate a lot. And like your whole job is just kind of like give people who are doing the implementing like the long-term vision and like the big artifacts, much less than like the specs of like, here's this feature with every little like pixel. So I don't know, it could go either of those directions, but either way, like, I don't think the PM role, the way it works right now, is going to last that much longer.
Yeah. So I feel like the role of PM, the role of engineer, the role of technical product manager have all been things that have kind of emerged through the pattern of work over the last 15 or 20 years of patterns. And suddenly we're seeing,
Yep.
as you just stated, like these patterns shifting dramatically. And I think that
Yeah.
from the technical implementer's perspective, it feels like so much more is potentially in scope. You can cover a much, much wider berth in the stack. You can potentially have really no constraints at all as long as you're willing to learn and dig in and understand, because you just have this like amazing mentor or senior engineer and staff engineer who's doing it for you. On the product side, I'm curious what you feel it opens up, other than the capacity to kind of like go technically deep if you want to and really do those sort of first MVPs. What do you think it opens up from maybe the technical side facing outwards towards the market?
I mean, the job of PM always felt like you were like, behind. You're always behind on everything. And I think maybe, so if your job as a PM is now just like paint the long term and like you genuinely do not have to like be involved in the short term execution, because other than maybe you are, maybe you're, I'm responsible for the vision. And like, as people are building stuff, I work with them and like look at it and like tell them like, we like work together on like how close this seems. And like, I try to kind of like keep all these different trains on the tracks. If that's the role, like I could see that being really valuable. But everything I've done with AI has just been made me like dramatically more efficient. And it's because I'm like not doing most of it, right? Like there's no reason that you can't create a competitive intelligence agent that just like goes out and does your competitive intelligence research every night and looks at it and then says, hey, like based on this, like I think, and like I look at your vision, like I also think you should build this thing, and like which you can apply that to any knowledge work, but building that out for product work, I think is probably, I think there's a role for that for a while at least.
Do you feel, I mean, I'm curious, some engineers I talk to are threatened by the like replacement, perhaps, although I think
Totally.
obviously that's one narrative. Others are threatened by just the feeling that this craft has become something very, very like basically the art has been completely squeezed out of this thing that was just, it was a craft, like a beautiful, beautiful craft just a few years ago.
Yeah.
And the more technically deep people I talk to, the more they feel that way. Like where they spent, potentially years of their lives, potentially decades, perfecting knowledge of really difficult languages and really sophisticated models. Some of the metaphors that I've kind of come back to in this is how it must have felt to be like a longbowman or like an archer when the machine gun arose. And it's just like, oh, this machine produced thing just totally outdoes me. I'm curious to hear your reactions to that, and also like reflect on how does that make you feel as now a technical person sitting in that seat?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I've seen that too. So like one response I've had to that has been, if you, I don't know, I don't know if it comes off as cynical, but like if you love the craft, you can still do it. No one's stopping you from doing it. Like you can still spend time in the code. It might not be as like economically viable, but like not all art is. So I don't know how like negative that comes across, but like I do think that's like that's true. Like if you really love it, like, and you just feel like it's like this fascinating puzzle and you love like making the perfect code, like you can still do that. There's genuinely nothing stopping you. The other thing I would say is like for folks that feel that way and have that depth of experience and expertise, like I don't think they're going anywhere for a while. The stuff I'm doing, this stuff, it's very error prone. Like even, so I build like a lot of greenfield stuff. That's genuinely what I'm applying these tools to. And even for that, I have a ton of checks around it and it goes wrong a lot. And like, I have to use my own expertise to like keep that on track. It's like way worse in like a legacy code base. And the AI tools are better at some things than others. They're not great at, like system architecture. They're not great at like that kind of stuff. So like a staff engineer that does that sort of level of thinking, still super valuable. Like I think I saw something from you from one of your previous appearances where you were talking about like 1,000 times more software. That I don't know if that's going to be the number, but if that's true, it's not like there's going to, you're going to not want any staff software engineers. You're still going to want those people. So yeah, I guess those are kind of like my two big thoughts on that. Yeah, the other thing I would say is like I have found, and maybe this is hard probably for someone that has written code for 20 years, but like I have found a lot of enjoyment in like just the next layer of abstraction, right? Like a lot of code is an abstraction for like assembly code. So, I mean, this is different, but like all the harnesses, all the checks, all of the like stuff around it, like it's a different discipline, but I find it to be pretty interesting and fascinating as well. So for some people, I think like I see different engineers respond different ways. Some people find this new discipline to be more fun. Some people, they miss the old.
Yeah. There's two metaphors that are two things that came to mind. The one is I've come back to a few times in my conversations recently is right now, I think being in the technical seat feels a whole lot like that Steve Jobs era metaphor of riding the bicycle of the mind, where you really can just sort of like go with an idea and sort of see where it puts you, and you can get there so much faster. Uh, and I think to your point, there is this feeling of joy. There's this beautiful, beautiful joy that sort of comes with just that direct interface and that really, really quick feedback loop. And for the kind of technical person I've been, which I think been a little bit more oriented at the result of the craft rather than the craft itself, that has been a really, really like rewarding place to be. But then there are other people who are just, really focused on, I don't know, perhaps akin to like being really interested in the quality of paint and exactly how paint is made and
Yeah.
all of the sort of fine points of the art that are sort of within the materials. Whereas I think I'm more interested in the kind of painting that results from it.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I mean, and I do think the like sort of economics of it is like an interesting thing to say because, you know, if it is art, then it's just been the most lucrative art ever for a while. And like there's plenty of artists out there who do love paint and they get paid, most of them don't get paid a lot and most people playing a guitar don't get paid a lot, but like they still value their art. People still do. It's just like, you're not going to like be at Google making, X $100,000.
Right. Yeah, I think the question of where the economic components of it, which obviously has been, the most happening and exciting edge of the economy for our entire careers, for the entire span of our
Yeah.
careers. We've been in a world where this industry is growing hand over foot, growing like, doubling in size every few years, which is just not something that one could say for almost any other sector of the economy. And I
Yeah.
personally do wonder whether that is poised to change. I wonder whether there will be a cap on the sort of demand for software. One other thing that's come up recently is just how disposable software feels now when your kind of agent is able to write really complex queries to query your JSON stuff, and it's just in context and gone forever. And it's like, oh, wait, where was that really nice function? That thing that we would have carefully tagged and definitely committed to our code bases before is now just literally like a sneeze in terms of how we treat it and
I
its
know.
importance. It's really wild.
Yeah. I mean, something I think about a decent amount is like, so I mean, you're familiar with skills, meaning skills in Claude Code or any of these tools. For folks who are not, a skill it's basically just a big prompt that contains like a set of instructions that an agent can use, a coding agent can use. And sometimes I'll have like thoughts of like, oh, like I should build that thing, and like my kind of previous brain, you would build that like it'd be like a SaaS product, and you'd build it and you put it out there on the internet, and like people would subscribe and use it. There are so many things like that it's just a skill. Like that would just be a skill. And if you built that as a SaaS product, someone would just say, "Oh, well, I'm not paying for that because I can just like someone could just make a skill and use it directly that way for free and distribute it to the whole world." It's speaking to the disposability of software. Like I think there's a lot of software right now that you could Claude Code, Codex, these agents could do so much that if you just give them the right skill, they can be a whole SaaS product.
100%. I agree. So that actually, to me, just totally inspires like a next question, which is how do you sit in the founder's seat? How do you sit in the technical founder's seat looking at the SaaS apocalypse and feel like that there's room to create value? Where do you look for value sitting in the technical founder's seat right now?
So I mean, there's tons of I talked about how like there's tons of like opportunities to integrate AI just throughout the economy. I think so. One thing I think about in like the startup I'm working on, it's in like a fairly non-technical vertical, and so I think there's just like the world is ripe for that. Like if you talk to go talk to a doctor, go talk to a dentist, like the amount of AI they're using, it's pretty low. And there's just no reason for it. And I'm not even talking about like the front office, like their back office, how their team handles things. Like, they're just, for most people, AI is ChatGPT still. So another way to, another angle on your question though is like, how do you think about like creating a product and not having it just get clobbered by, Chat GPT or Claude in 6 months? The best advice I've heard is like, think about whether or not your product will get better as the models get better. If the answer is no, then like you're probably like, you probably shouldn't build that product. If your product gets better as the models get better, like, you're going to be in a better spot because they are going to get better. It's all going to keep getting better. If you build on top of AI and you are thinking about, where it's going and try and not kind of like, you're a lot less defensible if as models get better, your product gets worse. You're in a bad spot if that's the case.
Are there any particular products that you think have done that really, really well? Perhaps maybe outside of the coding agents that we just mentioned?
Nothing obvious is jumping to mind. What about you? Did any jump to your mind?
I was trying to think about whether I use any of the so Cursor is something that is not attached to a major AI lab that I've been an active user of for about a year now. And I found myself recently increasingly using Claude Code, probably just because like Opus 4.5 and 4.6 have just been like showstoppers in terms of performance and precision. I'm trying to think about the adoption in other areas of my life. Gemini as being integrated into Google, all the Google products
Yeah.
has just really, really centered me in that being the baseline thing I use across Google Docs, across Calendar, across like my voice assistant. And so it's brought me
Yep.
back to like dominantly to companies that could be argued are like already ones that are ahead. I'm trying to think if I've seen in the legal domain where I worked for many years, I've definitely seen the use of it as a means to kind of gain entree into industries that had been kind of insulated from the technology world for a long time. It's been a huge story of the success for companies like Harvey and Lagora and even my former company as well.
Yeah.
Um, and perhaps medicine as well. Like I think that I remember seeing a doctor, increasingly I've seen doctors bring out voice transcription technology during appointments and,
Yep.
basically say, hey, is this okay? Okay, this is great. And it just helps them completely automate their creation of their note to a lot of those back office tasks. So I think, yeah, I guess I see these vertical niches where it's beginning to kind of leak into the rest of the economy in a way that is creating a lot of value. I guess I haven't seen the emergence of like a brand new consumer platform that has really shifted my life other than the
Yeah.
ones from the foundational companies.
Yeah, that's what I'm like looking through the apps on my phone right now and I'm like, is anything really, really done that? Nothing is really like jumping off the page, which I mean, maybe that's kind of evidence of like, there's a lot of companies that have like done well in this version. Like Vercel is one that I love. I think they've done an incredible job and they've just made it, the AI tools love deploying on Vercel for whatever reason. And they keep on layering features on that use AI in interesting ways. But again, it's like, some of these are like entrenched, right? And it's like, so maybe that's part of the answer though, is like, you have to have like a true core competency that is like real defensible tech, that isn't just like, you're like a slim AI wrapper that could basically be a skill or like, you're just, yeah, like you have to have something that's like truly unique and hard to create. Or else like, I mean, you've probably seen the LinkedIn posts. So you're kind of ridiculous sometimes, but it's just like, our CTO like vibe coded a new CRM. Like that's not real, but like there are, there are a lot of things. There are things like that where it's like, I think a lot of software vendors that build semi-simple products, like they really got to look out because, like an example actually is, uh, anything that's like any business that was like classifying text, on behalf of companies, which there was a lot of like customer feedback related stuff. I mean, it's pretty hard to imagine how that survives because it's just you have to find out how you're going to differentiate yourself from like I can just dump that into ChatGPT and ask it to do the same thing and it's probably going to do it better.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I think one example that comes to mind for me was there is I write a lot in Go these days, and there's I think it's called Pandoc, if I'm recalling correctly, which is was one of the last age of the internet's primary big, multi-format implementations of document encoding, decoding, a lot of like serialization, deserialization, etc. And
Yeah.
Pandoc, the utility of Pandoc now, when you can really just like rewrite a ton of its functionality, net new, just even potentially inspired from implementations in other languages, just makes it such a small lift that the price that it would be able to effectively sell itself at is very, very low. I think also a lot of historical scraping services, stuff that was like gathering data from the internet, it's so much faster to kind of implement that
Totally.
stuff. Not necessarily take it to production, take it all the way there, but to get that code up and running and accurate is so much faster than it was.
Yeah. There's another one that just jumped to my mind that I talk about sometimes is Feedly, which I don't know if you know what that is. It's an RSS reader. Sorry. And it's, it has, it's like if you get to like 50 RSS feeds or something, it's like, okay, upgrade to Pro. And it's like $10 a month. And I'm just like, I mean, I could do this right now. It does have a few semi-interest, it's got like some folders and it's got like, some like suggest stuff to you. But like, I mean, it is just, I don't know how Feedly is going to survive unless it's like dramatically changes because it's an RSS reader. I mean, I seriously, I think like probably by the time we were done with this call, one of us could build Feedly. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I've so one of the area of like the development of products that I have never been an expert at, but that I've probably have been overly opinionated at is like design, like wanting things to feel nice and look nice, and then always feeling like it's difficult to achieve. And I've recently
yeah,
had an experience using Figma Make and comparing that to the experience of Cursor, and Figma Make is
yeah,
this new sort of prompt-driven development feature from Figma. And it was like a delightful experience. It truly was a delightful
yeah,
experience. Again, there was the process of kind of getting it out of that and into a larger application context, which was like where one needed to kind of have the know-how on how to do that correctly and hook things up and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that process, that feedback loop of being able to go from concept to like a real live working version of that concept was truly delightful.
yeah. There's another one. Google Stitch is another one that's similar to that. That I really like. If you could give that a try if you're interested. I used Figma Make for a while, and I actually never figured out how to get stuff out of Figma Make without creating an account, or without paying for it. There's probably a way. Somebody smart like you probably figured it out.
Well,
Um,
I think we
but
we
like,
did have a paid seat, so that could be the answer.
oh, if you're at a paid seat, that's the answer. Yeah, no. If you're just trying to get by it without one like me, that's when the real challenge came in. But yeah, I mean, it's incredible, and it's yeah, it kind of like speaks to some of the like existential AI stuff where it's just like, people are like, can AI be creative? And it's like, well, like, is that creative? It sure looks creative. Like,
Yeah.
I asked it to like make a unique looking thing that doesn't look like these other things, and it did it. So like, I know it was just kind of random, but it's pretty great. It looks awesome and it is unique. So I don't know, like, is that creative? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So since sort of getting into the seat of, back in the technical founder seat, back in the seat of sort of experimenting, what have you been throwing yourself at? It seems like you've been very involved in the Seattle AI scene. How have you been choosing what to sort of throw your effort at and really pursue? Where do you look for value in your own time?
I mean, I started using these tools 5 or 6 months ago. Um, my youngest kid's 11 months old, and so for maybe 6 months ago is when I really got into it because before that I was pretty in baby mode. And so I would say like I just realized how good these tools were and they kept getting better. And like you talked about Opus 4.5, and which is the one most people like. There's like people have had eureka moments. Like I'm not the like I had a eureka moment with it. And so I've just kind of been like running after that. And I so like something I've told people is I've gotten some job offers. I apply for, some jobs here and there, kind of like only dream jobs right now. And the reason is just that I feel like the opportunity cost of having a job would be giving up all this exploration that I'm doing right now. And I feel like it's super high ROI, like long term. And I am trying to like sort of, I am actually doing some, like I told you, like I actually I have a startup. I am doing some actual consulting that pays me actual money. I am trying to diversify my like professional portfolio a little bit. So I'm not just only hacking on stuff that is like possibly high ROI, but very speculative. But I just, the idea of having a full-time job right now, that is, just a 9 to 5, it feels like I'd be leaving a lot on the table. I think if I hadn't had this last 6 months, I don't know where I'd be. And I think, I talked about like what I think is going to happen to white collar work. I don't think I would have any of the perspectives I have now had I stuck around, at a 9 to 5. And, and I feel like, for better or for worse, the economy is going to change. These roles are going to change. And I really love this stuff. Like I haven't been this happy professionally in a long time. So that's one part of it. But also like, I do think like competitively speaking, you want to be on the top of this stuff right now. Like the economy is changing. You need to be thinking about it.
Yeah, I agree. When in deciding where to kind of like double down, like if you were to, for instance, guide somebody who maybe doesn't have the same intuition about the kind of projects to choose and the projects to kind of like follow, what's the kind of guidance that you would give them to find value?
I mean, I would just tell people to like to play with these tools and work with them and try to build stuff that like, I mean, most people I talk to, especially product folks, they've always had little ideas they wish they could have built and like they didn't, like for me, I've had a million ideas that I've always wanted to build, but like the like boring parts of coding, like setting up your environment and like just all that's like, I just hated it all. So I was just like, I'm never going to like spend the time to do this. Now that's not a barrier for me. And I feel like that's true for a lot of folks. I would tell them to just play with it, learn the tools, because you start to see like the reason I think the economy is going this direction is because I see the only barriers between large parts of almost any white collar work being automated is just like where the tech is today and where the like harnesses are around it today. And all you have to do is see how orchestrating multiple agents and like agent loops and like, saving context and like having them use the right tools. Like it's all there. The pieces are there. The constituent parts are there. Yeah. So like, so I wouldn't point people towards a specific project. I would say like, get your mind around these tools, use them, get to the point where you feel like you really understand how they work. And that's like how I think that's the most beneficial thing. Beyond that, something I'm doing is like talking to folks that I know that are in non-technical industries, and something I'm exploring is kind of like working with them and saying like, hey, like, how's your business work? I have all this AI expertise. You have a lot of domain expertise. I'm interested in like whether I could help you apply AI to like your workflow or your business in some way. I would suggest people do that. I think like it'd be helpful I guarantee it'd be helpful for them, helpful for you at the very least. And that's something I'm doing.
Yeah. How do you kind of navigate your way through the kind of like, I'm on Reddit sometimes and I'm on Twitter, and they feel like totally different worlds. Like if I go to R programming, everybody is bashing, vibe coded garbage, blah, 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 blah. If I go to Twitter or LinkedIn, everyone is sharing, as you mentioned, the CRM that their CTO built in a single weekend. And it feels like, what's the grounded middle ground where one can be like, this is the kind of like practical thing that I'm seeing that is sort of that is real and foundational and, truly creating value or creating new things?
Yeah, I mean that's why my advice is to use it yourself, because I feel like you have to like form your own perspective, because there is so much stuff out there, so much noise. In any growth industry, there's going to be a lot of noise and hype and people trying to profit off of it and sell their guide and all that stuff. Um, Also, like, get in the real world and don't just be online with it. Like, I did a presentation last night where I was presenting like my workflow, and something I realized like after I did the presentation, I was just like, I found I had a hard time kind of like grounding my like where is the room and where am I and like what do I need to like what context do I need to set? I actually don't think I did a great job with that. And like part of the reason is just because of what you said. Like there's so much online and everybody online is like either super critical or they're super far ahead and like it's just hard to like navigate. But being in that room, it like brought me back to like, okay, like I can kind of like orient myself with real people who are, these are people who are at an AI Tinkerers event. They're very AI forward people, and so like I have to use that as well. But it helps me kind of ground myself into like here's where like real people are in real life, and like not everyone is either like hypercritical or like building agent swarms. Like
Yeah. Something you mentioned in the prelude to our conversation was, you know, getting a little bit, either philosophical or sci-fi. I think we are seeing certain types of intelligence get commoditized. What does the future look like there?
yeah. I don't know. It very much concerns me. I'll say that. I think like um, the there's an essay that the CEO of Anthropic wrote, "The
Oh,
Adolescence of Technology." I don't know if
I,
you've read it.
I haven't. No. What are your top
Yeah, it's it's
takeaways?
it's really good. So he has that one. Then he has one prior to it that's called "Machines of Loving Grace." That one is like the optimistic take on AI, and this one is kind of like the like cautionary version of it. And it's basically talking about all the things that can go wrong, and that like this powerful AI is coming. He uses this analogy of a country of geniuses, which is like he's like if that kind of like became true, like there was just a country of geniuses on Earth, how would like governments respond? Like as an analogy. And if you think about it that way, like they would respond as like this is probably like the biggest threat that we've ever faced, and it's true. Like if they're genuinely geniuses and there's hundreds of thousands of them, how are they going to respond to us? How do we like protect ourselves from them? If they're relatively unbounded and they can talk to anybody and they can talk to malicious actors, what happens? It's a fascinating essay. I would totally read it. If you read it, read the other one too, because the other one's a lot more optimistic and will make you not be as upset, I would imagine. But it's kind of it says it's adolescence of technology because it's talking about how we're going to have to get through this turbulent time, and like his thesis is we can do it. But even in like the like very we talked about like if the technology stopped today, even in that version, the amount of like just economic displacement that's going to happen over the next 10 years is going to be really significant. Um, and like there's going to be a whole reordering of the economy, and like what happens if like there's only jobs for 70% of people, or I don't know what happens in those worlds. I think there's just a lot to it's going to be a really hard time to navigate. I hope like the governments of the world are up to it, because ultimately like that's where a lot of this is going to have to come from. Yeah, I mean, I think at the very least, there's a challenging time is coming. There's also so much good that can come. Like AIs they're making like medical discoveries and solving mathematical equations that humans couldn't. That's already happening. It's not like crazy to say AI could cure cancer. That could happen. With I'm sure with human partnership, but like it's going to be a turbulent time. It's going to be exciting. But it's going to be. I think it's going to be hard too. Like I really think it's going to be hard.
Something that feels like a very kind of like tier one tech city thing, like a Bay Area thing, a New York thing to some degree, a Seattle thing, is this concern about the current kind of economic structure getting kind of locked in place. because of the sort of
Yeah.
fast takeoff. Basically, creating a permanent underclass and a permanent set of overlords and owners. And
Yeah.
basically launching us further into kind of oligarchy and feudalism. And I'm curious whether you think does any of that feel real to you? Do you feel that fear of like massive inequality kind of, or I guess what's already fairly high inequality kind of creating a new social reality?
I mean, that would be terrible. Um, every time I think about this stuff, I think something different, like I thought I had the other day I was like, this is definitely like, I think we're going to see a lot of like commoditization of intelligence, right? And does that mean that people go back to, and also, you talk about like deep fakes and online, like you can't trust what's online. Will that lead to people being more in person? And then there's more community fabric and, software as a service is like less defensible. So people focus more on their communities, and maybe there'll be more of like a focus back to the arts as like STEM is less of a like lucrative, like that's a thought that could probably happen.
Yeah.
I hope it like, that sounds great, but like, will there be a permanent underclass? I don't know. I really hope not. That would be really sad. I do think like the amount of power that the owners of these models are going to have. I mean, they're going to be like, they're going to be like nation states of their own in a lot of ways. And, that's kind of extending, I guess, the like country of geniuses idea. I don't know. I think, I don't think that world is good for anybody though. Even them, like people talk about, like something I've heard before, like the whole like Zuckerberg's building like a fort on Hawaii or whatever. It's like he's got security guards who are hired there. Well, it's like, what are those security guards going to do if like, the social order breaks down? Like they're just going to be like, well, I don't care about your money anymore. And you're Zuck, you're good at Taekwondo or whatever martial art it is that he practices, but like, we're the guys with the guns now. So I don't think that society works long term, regardless. I think people do talk about kind of like, surveillance states and stuff like that. I find it hard to believe that that's where things end up.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things, I mean, I think that there's a tendency among all people to sort of think of themselves at living at the end of history, that there's going to be some like final
Yeah.
showdown and they're going to witness it. And this is the sort of millenarian people that the cults that believe that Jesus is definitely coming now versus 100 years from now, or the people that believe that the asteroid is destined, or the aliens or the alien abductions or whatever one have. There's a tendency and there's a psychological propensity for us all to believe that we are living at pivotal moments in history. And even when I try to correct myself for that bias, which I know exists, it does feel like this is a pivotal moment in history. And I'm like, that could still be that bias. Like, I
Yeah.
don't really know, but I guess it does feel like being able to see. I don't really know what it looks like over the hill. I don't really know what it looks like beyond the horizon line, but to be at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the kind of late 1800s, to have watched the kind of first railroads emerge from the major cities of the East Coast, and to have thought, oh, wow, it's about to get really different. You would have been completely right.
Yeah.
And I bet there were a lot of people there
Yeah.
that were completely right.
I think I genuinely think that's the base case, is like industrial revolution level change. And I think society would probably navigate that. That would be painful. And I do think that's like the base case, but yeah, there could be a lot more over the hill. I think there are pretty prominent AI folks that don't think LLMs are like ultimately where like kind of AGI or super intelligence or something lead. And they might be right, and then the base case is probably true. But they I don't know. The more you interact with them, like we talked about the creativity and stuff, there are still gaps, but I think the whole, going back to the whole, like, it's hard to predict. I think everything's on the table right now.
Yeah. Well, Ben, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a pleasure to reconnect and chat with you about the crazy future that we're living in.
Yeah, we are. We're living in real time.